And so that's what the program is aiming to do for the next 2 weeks or so.
So what would you come? Where would one? For another person would say, how do you define violence? Where do you draw the line?
Yeah, I think that's a very difficult question, and I think here in South Africa in particular, I think violence is something.
It's uncalled for, violence for me. It's the last thing. It would be the last thing to sort of, to come up with an amicable resolution in a way. And thank you that here in South Africa, institutions like the IGR, who totally took a stand against violence, and also have made inroads in, coming up with solutions and educating people. But in Africa, has violence, we see every now and then, when you listen to African, I'm sorry to say this, maybe might be the media, we don't normally hear some good stories. Mostly you see the violence one from another, Is it because of social silence, the way people are, or what?
I don't think so. I don't think that people are inherently violent. I'm no expert on violence, I have to say, but I would say, sort of off the top of my head, that we are inherently probably good and peaceful beings. But I think in a lot of African countries, we've seen systematic human rights violations, systematic segregation and marginalization of people, and this has a very negative impact on how societies and communities are constructed. I think it damages the very fiber of societies, and I think we see that quite clearly here in South Africa, where for such a long time we had systems which really had a very negative impact on parts of the majority of our people, and unfortunately, if these issues are not resolved, if people's basic human rights aren't met, and if there are systems of oppression, and if there are identity issues that are negatively affected by oppression, then I think that unfortunately creates room for violence.
Do we know our human rights?
That's a very good question. I think there's a lot more room to know our human rights, put it that way. And I think that education curricula across the continent could definitely do a lot more work. Teachers could be doing a lot more work. Universities should be doing a lot more work to make sure that we know our rights. And of course then, the issue of course is what do we do once our rights have been violated, and are there institutions and mechanisms in place which will then ensure that our violations of those basic rights are then rectified in some way or another.
I want you to talk about that. Do we know what to do after that? If you've been violated, do we really know where to go? If you've been violated, what step to take? And for me, there's not even be able to say, personally, I still believe that people say, I'm being violated. Well, that's how the system is. That's what I get. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's difficult as well, and I think unfortunately part of the plight that South Africa and many African countries face is that our judicial systems and our policing systems aren't in the kind of shape that we need them to be in order to make sure that once we have been a victim in whatever way, that the law actually protects us. And I think that really is the challenge that we face. Unfortunately, I see in a lot of African countries that human rights have been violated systematically for such an incredibly long period of time that even if people did know their rights, I'm not sure that they particularly care almost, because what do you do with those issues? So obviously a lot of people have joined civil society organizations, and civil society organizations around the continent and around the world are doing fantastic work in terms of making sure that access to justice programs are rolled out and doing awareness raising on people's rights. But bringing people together in community healing settings, bringing people together with their leaders and facilitating dialogue between people, so at least at the community and grassroots level, some of these issues can be spoken about and can be resolved.
Tonight it's a talk. Just introduce me to the talk. Who's going to be there and how is it going to, the program going to look like?
So IJR has events like these on an ongoing basis, and really the purpose is for us to reach out to people who are interested in issues that we work on. And so tonight the event is going to be on peace, security and conflict prevention and the post-2015 development agenda. And a number of my colleagues will be there. Dr. Fani Dutoy, who's our Executive Director, will be speaking to Mr. Ali Kiai, who is the Secretary General of the United Nations. Association of South Africa. And so the question is, the association which Mr. Kiai is part of is pushing very hard for issues around violence and security to be included in the Millennium Development Goal agenda in future. So we'll be talking about whether this is actually something that is viable, that it's constructive. Is this something that will help in terms of enhancing conversations and action around world peace? So, and of course, participants are invited to participate in the conversation. It's very much a conversation rather than a talk. And so we welcome people to IJR tonight at 5 o'clock in Hatfield Street to join us in this conversation.
Okay, so everyone's invited.
Absolutely.
All right. 5. Let's make it 5 o'clock for 5:30.
Yes.
And then 5:30 on the dot, everyone the conversation starts.
Absolutely.
And it's titled what? Freedom from violence, huh?
That is the topic for tonight, absolutely. But with a particular focus on the conversation around including an additional Millennium Development Goal in the Sustainable Development Agenda.
Okay, I hope those who are listening will... We'll send one or two from our side to come and be part of this.
Fantastic. They'll be very welcome.
It's a great pleasure. Thanks, man, for coming through and pushing radio, man.
Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
Bye. That's Ms. Friederike there from the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation. And again, as usual, they always host talks. Today, they're having talks at the IGR offices. That is 105 Hatfield Street Gardens. 5 o'clock for 7:30, and talks will be on Transitional Justice in Africa programs, part of those freedom from violence, peace, security, and conflict prevention in the post-2015 and in United Nations Development Agenda. Quite interesting. Please do go, if you are around in the CBD area, please do hop in, or if you are listening to this program back here, do me that favor, just scratch whatever you wrote there in the diary and say, okay, by 5 o'clock I must be at this event and be part of it, because we are being violated in one form or another. Violence doesn't only talk about physical violence. Violence manifests itself in many forms. For those just tuning, this is Beckett. Good afternoon. You're gonna have to help me with this.